Hi, I wanted to just take a few minutes to walk you through a practice that I like to use whenever I have a really strong or uncomfortable emotion or an emotion that's just really been sticking around for a while. And if you're like any other human being, you probably have tried lots of things like to get rid of the emotion, to suppress it, to run away from it, to minimize it, to distract yourself from it. You may have even shamed yourself for experiencing the emotion or have gone into the story about that there's something wrong with you for having this emotion or that you're broken or that you're not good enough because you're not just happy and feeling good and at peace all of the time. Those were some of my stories anyways. So, really what I've learned over the years, and this was because of personal practice of my own, I learned that emotions were there to tell us something. They are there for a reason. It's a physiological response that happens inside of our body because of either an external trigger or a thought or something that's going on in our mind or an experience that we've had in relationship to somebody else or an event. And so when we have these physiological responses, we often name them with an emotion. For example, anger, anxiety, sadness, excitement, joy, pleasure, worry. Those are some of the names that we might use for some of the emotions. And when we're having a really strong or uncomfortable emotion, it tends to be something that people want to get rid of. And what I find is all the tools or the, let's say, habits that we tend to use, like I said, the distraction, the running away, the shame, the minimizing, all of that stuff might make it go away or feel less uncomfortable for a little while, but it doesn't last very long. And that emotion tends to come back and sometimes even stronger. It's sort of like this emotion is saying, hello, I'm here. Why aren't you looking at me or paying attention to me? So the invitation here for today's practice is to actually look towards your emotion and lean into it. I think so often what I experienced myself and what I've often experienced with my clients when working with them is they are afraid that if they lean into the emotion, that they're just going to fall apart or they're going to lose it completely. It's possible you may fall apart, but I guarantee you it's not going to be for the rest of your life. It may be a falling apart and a release of emotion for a minute or two, or sometimes a few minutes, longer than that. But if you can sit with it, it's really beautiful and amazing to see what's on the other side of that. So I wanted to take you through this practice of what does it look like to actually sit with your emotion. And one of my favorite things to do with people is to take them through a guided visualization, meditation with their emotion. So if today you have an emotion that you want to bring into this practice just to try it out, I would suggest doing that. And it doesn't have to be what you would call a negative emotion. It could be something that feels really good, like pleasure or excitement or joy. So if you have that emotion, feel free to use that in this practice as well. It's really fun to see what we can find there. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, and feel free to watch this video over several times if you need to really feel and embody this practice and this way of being in relationship with your emotion. So the first thing I like to do is I like to ground myself in my body, and the way that I do that is by connecting to my five senses. So I find a place to sit, and for me, when I want to sit with my emotions, I literally go sit on the floor. That has been my sort of ritual of how I sit with an emotion. For you, it might be a special place in the house or a place that you really feel comforted. Whatever space that is for you is great. So when I sit down, I attempt to ground myself by connecting to my five senses and connecting to my breath. So I'm looking for, what am I hearing? What am I seeing behind my eyelids? What am I smelling? What am I tasting? What am I feeling on my skin and on my body, through my body? And then taking some really deep intentional breaths and noticing what it feels like to take a breath in through my nose, down through the back of my throat, into my chest and belly, and exhale out my mouth. And with just several deep breaths like that, really intentional, it can oftentimes be enough to trigger the vagus nerve, which sends signals to the brain that says we're safe and we're okay right here and right now. And so it brings a little bit of calm to your nervous system as you're doing this practice. So we ground ourselves, we connect to our breath, and then we start to scan our body. And all the while, I have my eyes closed, just so you know. So we scan our body, and we are bringing whatever strong emotion it is that we are experiencing in that moment. So I'm, for this purpose, going to use the emotion of anxiety, just because that's a very common one. And so I may not even know that I feel anxious. I just know something's happening in my body and it feels really strong, right? So I'm sitting here, I'm grounded, and now I am scanning my body to see what are the physiological responses that are happening. Okay, I'm noticing my heart is racing really fast. I'm noticing that my jaws are clenched. I'm noticing that I'm holding my breath. I'm noticing that I feel like my body just needs to move, like I can't sit still. And as I start to identify all these physiological responses, then I give myself the opportunity to name the emotion. And an emotion, again, is just the physiological response or a collection of them in your body. And so if we could name it, what would it be? And I would say, this is anxiety. And by naming it, instead of saying I am anxious, but instead saying this is anxiety, it actually forces our brain to take a step away as the observer looking at the anxiety. So here's me, here's the anxiety, and I'm saying this is anxiety, what I'm looking at and what I'm experiencing. And so it gives us a little bit of spaciousness between ourselves and the emotion. Then from there, I start to ask myself, where in my body am I feeling this the strongest? If there was an epicenter to the anxiety, where does that live in my body? And I will just say it's in my chest. When I feel that, it is very natural for me to actually put my hand on that spot. If it's not natural for you, I would invite you to try it out, because self-touch can be a very nurturing and affectionate way of being with yourself. And so if you're not used to that, try it out and see how that feels, if it feels safe to you. So I lay my hand on sort of the epicenter of the anxiety, and it's here in my chest. Okay. Now I begin to come into this experience with curiosity. I want to understand what is happening in my body and what is this emotion of anxiety. And if it had something to tell me, what does it want to tell me? So first, I like to allow it to take shape, and maybe it creates a picture in my mind. Maybe there's a feeling or a color. So whatever feels natural and doable for you. But I start to ask myself questions. Does this anxiety, if it lived in my chest, does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Does it have a temperature? Does it have a density? Does it have a weight? How small or how big is it? And all of these things start to create a picture in my mind. If you are not a very visual person, you may instead feel it, or maybe you hear words, or maybe there's, a flavor or a smell that starts coming to your mind because it reminds you of something. So however it shows up for you is totally wonderful. So once I identify, kind of come in with curiosity and kind of identify, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? Maybe what does it taste like and smell like? I can ask all these questions of it. I've gathered as much information as I can with my senses. Then I like to imagine taking whatever that is out of my chest and holding it in the front of my hands. And so if you need to physically do this and put your hands in front of you, feel free to do that. For me, I just imagined myself doing that in my mind. So I imagine that it's sitting in front of me, and I start to ask questions of this anxiety. So I start to ask questions like, for what purpose do you exist? What are you most afraid of? When were you created inside of me? How are you trying to support me? What is it that you need from me? How can we be in better relationship with each other and work together? And so I want you to let your mind ask whatever questions it wants to ask of the emotion in that time. If for you a guided meditation or visualization feels hard, maybe you do this through a written format. Maybe you write this out and you have an inner dialogue or a dialogue on paper with the emotion. Maybe you draw it out and use color and other mediums. So whatever way that feels appropriate to you. But the whole goal and purpose is to be in relationship with your emotion instead of running away from it. So bring curiosity as if you're getting to know this part of you for the very first time, and learn about what is it trying to tell you? What does it need? What does it want? What is it afraid of? And from there, you realize that as the adult, you can start taking some responsibility and some ownership and start doing some things that would help maybe create some more ease. And one of the things that I love to do is to lean into my emotion at the very end and thank it for being there for me, for serving me, for capturing my attention, for being in this conversation with me, and being grateful for the relationship that we are about to embark on and transform over the next few years. And so as you do that, you may notice that your emotion, however you saw it or felt it or heard it or tasted it in the beginning, will transform because it finally feels seen and heard and understood. And I think we misunderstand emotion and think it's something that we need to get rid of. But my invitation is, what if it's something that we are supposed to lean into? And what is the magic that you can discover when you're in relationship with that emotion instead of trying to get rid of it? So I hope this was helpful. Leave any comments if you have any questions and there's something that I can answer for you. And yeah, good luck with that.